Hello everybody and welcome to Learn Hittite for Complete Beginners. This is class number 9 and today we will be speaking about the past tense in Hittite. Now to begin with, what I would like to do is to go back to class number 6 where we introduce the present tense and just go over it. So here for example we have one of the slides that I used during that class, and we have here on the left the conjugation of the English verb to offer. I gave a conjugation of the Polish verb to offer here, and finally the same verb in Hittite. Now the reason that I gave the Polish example was because English has a relatively simple verb conjugation system, and only in the third person singular do we actually make a change to the ending of the verb. Now in Polish you can see that we have different conjugations for every single person and number, and because of that we can tell what person and number is being referred to simply from the verb ending, meaning that often we can drop the pronoun. Exactly the same works in Hittite. The exact translation of this verb would be something like to make a libation, and let's go through the conjugation right now. Shipanti, 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 shipantuweni, shipanzasteni, shipantanzi. And here we have our different endings present. We also spoke about how we can come up with this kind of overview of the Hittite verb conjugation system for the present tense. Hittite actually has two different flavors of verbs, type number 1 or type number 2, often called me or he verbs because of the first person singular ending, and this can be our kind of cheat sheet. If you learn these forms, you know pretty much 95% of the Hittite verb conjugations that you're likely to encounter. And it's relatively simple, relatively straightforward, easy to remember, but still more complicated than the system we have in English. We then put those verb conjugations into action by looking at two different types of verb, a type 1 here and a type 2 here. This actually is the same verb that we looked at previously, shipant. However, this time the word shipant is being represented with a sumerogram. Over here I gave the verb to rub or scrub with the appropriate present endings. So peshmi, peshi, peshzi, peshuani, peshtani, peshanzi. Here I gave the sumerogram because it made it easy for us to see the appropriate conjugations being tagged on to our root form. Now here what I've done is I've taken the same two verbs and I've applied the endings for the past tense. So for to rub and scrub we get peshun, pesht, pesht, peshwen, or rather peshuwen, peshten, pesha. Now, even though we have the sumerogram here, it's highly likely that people reading the Hittite cuneiform at the time will have still pronounced this word as if it was represented using Hittite syllables. So balachun would actually be spoken as shipandachun, shipanta, shipanta, shipanduwen, shipanten, shipanter. Of course, it's possible that some Hittite scribes will have just taken the sumerogram and used the Hittite endings to a sumerogram pronunciation of this symbol. But as I said, most academics believe that sumerograms were simply spoken as if they were representing the Hittite form. And here on the screen now we have our overview, our cheat sheet for the past tense in Hittite. For the two different categories of verb, me and he verbs, we have these endings for the singular and these endings for the plural. It looks perhaps a little bit more complicated than the present tense cheat sheet that I presented earlier, but actually if you look closely, very often it's the same kind of root suffix being added with some small variations. Sta versus ta, to sh on the ending, usually dependent on whether there is a vowel or a consonant preceding it. Over here the forms are similar, perhaps not the same, and the plural forms also are similar between both verb forms. So again, the same with the present tense. It's important to learn these forms The sooner you learn them, the easier reading and accessing Hittite texts become. Now, I can say, however, that the verb form that you're probably going to encounter most often is going to be first person singular. At least that's my experience with the type of Hittite text that I like to read. So very quickly you'll get very astute at recognizing this ending and understanding that that's a verb you're looking at in the past tense. And don't just believe me, let's have a look at a Hittite text in action. And so here I have taken another extract from the text that we were looking at during the lesson where we discussed the Hittite war with the Elysians in Cyprus. This particular text, however, refers to something slightly different than the war itself. It describes when King Suppiluliuma II created a statue in the image of his father, Tudhalia, and he then took this statue and installed it at the top of a stone tower. Let's have a look at the vocabulary that we will need to understand this small text. Here we have a new determinative for stone. Here we have the sumerogram sagus, meaning eternal. Here we have another sumerogram, alam, meaning image, figure, but probably from context we will understand it as being statue in our text. Chigur, meaning tower or any type of elevated building. Du is actually a sumerogram which represents the Hittite word ia, the verb to make. Peda, verb to carry. Weda or ueda, the verb to build. So before we even begin to break this down, we can see this familiar ending. Un, first person, singular, past tense. Let's take this very first line. We've got stone, chigur, so stone tower. Sagus, eternal stone tower. Obviously word order is slightly different in Hittite. And wedachun, I built. Here it gets a little bit more complicated. We've got some enclitics here and here. But we don't need to focus on those too much in order to understand what the text is about. We have an acadagram, which I believe we've encountered either in class 2 or 3, which means in or into. Chigur sagus, we know, is the eternal stone tower. Alam is the image of the father. Dunun or ianun would be I made, and pedachun would be I carried. And so for this second line, we get something like I made the image of my father and carried it into, or perhaps onto, the stone tower, the eternal stone tower. If we wanted to put all of that together in perhaps slightly more flowing English, it would be I built an eternal stone tower, I made the image of my father and carried it into the eternal tower. Here we don't actually have a direct reference to father. That information was given to us in the preceding part of the text that we don't have here. Of course, it's the same as in English. We need context to understand everything accurately. But hopefully that you can see now with a vocab list and what we've learned about how Hittite verbs and Hittite nouns and adjectives function, it's really easy, perhaps even surprisingly easy, to be able to get yourself into reading Hittite texts and understanding some of the things which are written down. I love this particular text about Hittite adventures in Elysia. I will add a link where you can find an overview of the text and investigate it yourself. I hope this has been useful and informative for you today. It was a pleasure and an honour for me to spend a few moments talking to you about Hittite language. I'll be back very soon with another class. All the best and goodbye for now.